Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Paranormal Karen, funny too. Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Oh, and did I mention she's funny too? Yeah, cha-cha-cha.
Welcome to Paranormal Karen. Very excited about this week's episode. So I'm walking by my house where I walk Little Courage all the time, and I keep seeing this car, and it has stickers of Bigfoot all over it. And I keep thinking, how can I not know this person? Who is this person? It turns out it's my neighbor right down the hall. I talked to him and his girlfriend and their wonderful Bengal cat. And here we are on a Saturday afternoon. Carlos, thank you for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you, and tell everyone your last name. You have a great website called Chronicles of Carlos.
Carlos Jimenez. And yeah, chroniclesofcarlos.com. Email is cj@chroniclesofcarlos.com. And pretty much all of my social media is some variant of Chronicles of Carlos, Chronicles of Los. But they can find all that if they go to the website.
And you are, because every time we're out walking and we bump into each other, we start talking. This is the real deal, folks. This isn't reading books and just guessing. You are out there. So let's start at the beginning. What, because you're more of a science guy.
Yeah, I really was attracted to the sciences growing up. Even as I can remember enjoying, astronauts and things like that in elementary school. But and then in college is where I switched from the sciences, because I was pre-med freshman year out at Pomona College in Claremont, California. And I switched gears and took an anthropology class just because it was part of your breadth of study requirements. And my professor, Dr. James McKenna, was like, he brought it up. He's talking about Gigantopithecus and the potential that these fossils were Bigfoot. And that was like in my sophomore year. And so sophomore year, I switched from pre-med to anthropology because he said I could do my project at Pomona on Bigfoot as long as I looked at it. And he didn't even require a scientific look at it. I shouldn't say that. Soft scientific look at it was perfectly fine as long as I looked at what people's beliefs were, legends, the lore, and then any hard evidence, any physical evidence was welcome. So that was my project at Pomona.
And just give us an idea, what was this, 90s, 80s?
Oh yeah, that was the early 90s.
When this was not that popular.
It wasn't, but at the same time, it was funny because I grew up in the country, and I don't remember, when I look back, I don't remember knowing a lot about Bigfoot. But now, obviously, I know that lots of those big movies had come out. I mean, the '67 Patterson film is the most famous. And then in the '70s, you had Boggy Creek, which was a cult classic, but I never saw it back then. But the one I do remember seeing sometime, in my late childhood. Yeah, well, I love that one. I used that one as a teacher at the end of the school year just to entertain the kids, because I would share my stories with the kids as I would teach them science. In Texas in particular, I remember those students at C. King and Willow Ridge got to see Harry and Henderson's as part of just the end of the year, after the
And you're a science teacher now.
Science teacher and math, STEM, science, technology, engineering, arts, math.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in western Pennsylvania. A little town called Meadville was the one I would associate myself with, but my first Bigfoot encounter, we were actually living in this place called the Village of Custards, which was in the countryside outside of Meadville. I was actually in the Conneaut Lake School District, but we lived at an intersection where we were the last house that got picked up by the bus to go to the Conneaut Lake schools. Across the street from us, or down the road from us, then the next house down went to Cochranton, which was a different school district.
Split,
and then behind us was the swamp, and so then across the swamp, the first house you got to went to Meadville. So there were 3 different school districts, and we were at the edge, rurally, of the Conneaut Lake School District.
And Pennsylvania, to me, it's like I have a majority of guests that seem to be in Pennsylvania or come from Pennsylvania, and it has
I think it's the water.
Is it? It has such hauntings. First of all, I think it was in my first year I interviewed a Bigfoot guy that was writing many books that was also in Pennsylvania, and also just a side note. What's that town there that's on fire underneath, and there's only like one person that lives there? It's a very strange story because
I know the story, but I've never been to the town, and I'm not familiar with the name of it. I've been to the house that is built over the water, over the river, the famous place down by the Pittsburgh area, the Okeechobee River. I can't even think of the name of that house.
It's something. I know that that place always comes up as a haunted area, and it's not quite haunted but there's a fire underneath. There's a fire going on all the time underneath, so it's uninhabitable, except for like 2 people live there. And you can drive through, and it's kind of smoky. And I have to go there sometime. I'll get 400 emails now, and people will tell me exactly the name of that town. But so being in that area of Pennsylvania, the woods are not foreign to you.
No. I mean, we grew up, especially those years before I moved to Meadville, and we were country kids. You know, we played in the fields, played in the woods. You know, went fishing at night and camped.
And the woods weren't dangerous then, because that's kind of how I grew up. My backyard was woods and a golf course, and we'd have deer and every once in a while a bear.
Yeah, black bear now and again, but I mean, the worst thing that you might run into is a water snake, a snapping turtle, or the skunk. You know, that was pretty much your fears, and those weren't really anything that you were worried about as a kid. Your parents weren't either. You know, get out. You know, go outside and play. You know,
go outside and play.
Being in the house at all was, unless you were in there to do chores. I just remember being told to be outside, and that was kind of, what you did. In fact, my first Bigfoot encounter happened staying at a friend's house too late one summer night.
And this is when you were a kid?
Yeah, about 9. It was about 1980, and it was at a friend's house. I don't want to use his name because I haven't asked him yet, but I've been intended to. But there in the village of Custards, he was the one kid that had an Atari. You know, there were a couple of kids that had Ataris. But I was up there playing late, and it was a summer night. The sun had gone down, but again, you just walked home in the dark. Didn't even have a flashlight, but I did have a little Star Wars gun, because they were popular. That's why in the beginning I used to think it was like late 70s, but when I went back and looked at everything, I feel like it was 1980 that I just determined was the time that this sighting had happened. But I knew it was summer because, you weren't allowed to stay out late like that.
And it's freezing in Pennsylvania.
But it was warm. It was a nice summer night, and I was walking back in the dark because again, it's a dirt road, it's a country road. There's trees on both sides.
And how old?
About 9.
9. Okay.
Yeah, about 9 years old, and leaving his house and walking home. All of a sudden, it was just like the air and everything stood still suddenly, and you got that feeling, which I'm doing what you do and doing what I do. I now know it's not uncommon. That you feel like something's watching you, which is weird because people that hunt and things don't get that feeling from a predator even that there's a cougar watching me. You just don't get this same sense. It's as though it's the sense that you get when you feel like somebody else is watching you, like a person, because everybody has gotten that sense, turned and looked, and sure enough, somebody's there looking at them.
But when it's paranormal, it's almost a different. It's like you get a coldness.
The hair stands up. Like I'm telling you, every time I tell the story, you go back to it, and I'm getting goosebumps right now telling you, because you remember, because there's feelings associated with it. There's some part of our brain that's affected by these, like being in proximity to them, but especially when there's an encounter. And that first one was definitely, one that I, will never forget, because it went from that feeling of being watched, where I stopped dead in my tracks. Didn't hear anything, but then the wave, and this is weird because in my lifetime since, I've only one other time, and not in association with an encounter, smelled that smell that some people report. And this smell was very strong, just the rot, wet dog, sulfurish, and there's always that association of sulfur with demons. Things paranormal, but demonic in particular. And I wasn't thinking. I was raised very religiously, especially at that age. I was going to church all the time with my grandparents, but I didn't think demon. Like that didn't hit me, even after the encounter. Although I was definitely terrified. But yeah, and so then this smell, froze me in my tracks. I wasn't hearing anything, so I pulled on the trigger of that toy gun. And it went, whatever the sound was that it made. It was a
threatening sound.
It was a nails on the chalkboard sound, but this thing then did what at the time I thought I startled a bear and it had fallen down because there was a really steep ravine at the time. The creek had formed a steep ravine, and since then I've taken Renee back there to show her where this happened, and that was 40 years ago.
And Renee is with us. Renee
is with us.
Hi, honey.
And that ravine is now like a giant basin because it's meandered and eroded both sides, and it was really weird going back there a year ago.
So it popped out. You actually saw it.
No, it went down. Whatever it was, I thought I startled and it had like, whoa, and like, whoa, fallen down. Like my little child brain, that's what I thought I'd startled it. Now I think that it was kind of like a bluff charge type thing, but it wasn't coming towards me. It was breaking every branch, knocking trees and things, going down this steep hill.
Running probably.
Probably, but again, in my brain, that wasn't what my brain was processing it at the moment. The smell, that fear. I thought that I'd startled a bear, and that was, just the worst smelling bear that I'd ever smelled.
And how powerful you felt that Star Wars gun was.
Woo! And I took a few. There was a pathway that went down, so I went a little bit forward and looked back down that path because that would give me a view of the creek. The creek that was at the bottom, you couldn't see it through the woods. There was one path that went down that we all took as kids to go down there, and then either just catch crayfish, skip rocks, or there was a waterfall that if you walked up, you could go and there was like a little water hole. You could go swimming in there, and the waterfall would fall on us. But again, we're talking small, it's a little creek. But I moved forward, and I could see in whatever starlight or moonlight there was that night, this creature step out. And that's when I saw it.
Wow.
And it turned and it looked back at me, but I could only see it in silhouette because the light was getting it mostly from the top and the back, mostly from the backside. And it turned and looked at me. It took one step into the creek and took another step, and it was gone. And then I was gone. I mean, I never ran so fast in my life. I don't remember anything but like my big toes touching the ground as I went down that hill. And the rest of the night, through my curtains, I stared until the sun came up out at the wood line, because that creek flowed all the way down right by my bedroom, like down in the yard below my bedroom.
Now, did you think, did you know of Bigfoot at that time? Did you think it was, or you were just like, this is a thing?
I didn't know what it was. So that's why I don't think that I saw any of those Bigfoot movies until a little bit later, maybe my early teens, maybe the next couple years, because I do remember really vividly the 1976 film Sasquatch, The Legend of Bigfoot. But I don't remember when I saw it.
So it could have been later.
But at the time, I don't remember. Like, I know that I didn't know what I had seen. Like, I didn't know what I had seen, and I didn't want to, I was kind of in shock.
Very interesting, because I always thought sulfur is such an interesting substance, shall I say, because people use it to make black salt, which is something I'm thinking about doing an episode on, but it's a very touchy witchcraft subject. But I always thought, because people really describe demons as charred or as they have been burned, but I wonder if that sulfur smell might literally be when something enters through another dimension.
Now, 40 years plus later, fast forward with my education and being a science teacher, I'm wondering as well if things that can move between them, if taken as the axiom that something can be in more than one dimension or can cross dimensions, then this 3D world that we're in, with the chemistry that we have and the nuclear science that we have, when something does that and materializes, appears, whatever, again, I teach my students about the things we know, the things that we know we don't know, and the things that we don't know that we don't know. To me, this is one of those things that we know we don't know. So we know a little bit about it because people are obviously seeing and experiencing these things, including myself. But I've got no idea, so everything that I'm saying right now is complete conjecture. But I think that there's something to them coming across and into this dimension, that there could be there's got to be some kind of energy.
Chemical reaction.
That could create then chemical reaction, wherever they're coming from. Part of them could be interacting with this environment. I'm not sure, but I know that the smell, could be associated with any, the many hydrogen sulfur gas smells, hydrogen sulfide that we associate with rotten eggs, and some people's sticky gas.
I always think I used to smoke, and I the first light of the cigarette that had that sulfur in it. I still will walk by someone lighting a cigarette, and it's like the best smell in the world to me.
That's the match. Yeah.
It's the match, but it seems to hit that first light when it hits the paper or something like that. That's my favorite smell. Well, maybe cinnamon. But it's one of those things that it sends you, or you kind of get something from it. So, all right, Courage, you all right? So now there's so many. I have so many misconceptions about Bigfoot, and the guy I talked to last time sort of cleared up some of them, which is, first of all, they're fast.
They can be, yeah. I mean, the odd thing from my experiences is that first one, it walked away. The second one I saw stared at me, swayed a lot, got down on all fours very quickly, or down on into like they call it the spider crawl position. I didn't see it make that transformation, but I've now heard and talked to enough people that have seen it that it just seems that, they all say that it doesn't seem, like it's like a transformer. It doesn't seem normal.
And let's go back to the beginning of this. When was the second time you saw one?
That was in Washington State. I was in graduate school now under Dr. Grover Krantz, one of the famous anthropologists who first came out on television, lots of TV programs about him and Bigfoot. And I was with him in the early 90s and mid-90s.
And you chose this school and this teacher?
I'm sorry, mid-90s. Oh, no, I chose it. From Pomona, that experience in the early 90s. Then in the mid-90s, I went and moved to Washington State. Got accepted to graduate school. I'd flown up to interview Dr. Krantz for my undergraduate project at Pomona. And then I got accepted in. The head of the department at the time, John, he was very much behind my thesis. My master's PhD program there was going to be on Bigfoot. And so I'd basically written, they say all but dissertation. I'd done all my coursework and written, and then I'd actually even presented preliminary thesis at a Sasquatch Days talk in Harrison Hot Springs in British Columbia, and during that time, but never finished there. Because I almost died.
Well, we'll go back to that in a second.
And that's
died.
where I had my near-death NDE.
All right, so 2 anthropology teachers, am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay to Bigfoot. Is that because it fits into belief systems, or is it that anthropologists sort of, that's their thinking, they're not exactly scientific, but they're not exactly not scientific?
Well, again, anthropology is one of what they call the soft sciences. So it is a science, but the hardest science in anthropology would be archaeology, because you've got physical artifacts, and physical anthropology because you're looking at bones, and remains of primates and our us and hominoids and anthropoids, but not everywhere. I mean, again, I couldn't just go to any university in anthropology and then
you happen to find
this guy was well known for it. The university supported him to the point that they allowed him to
go on TV.
And he, while I was there, my teaching, other than teaching classes and helping out in the lab, my teaching assistantship was to go out and this is email time. This isn't like the Angel Fire was the World Wide Web back then. My one classmate did sell some, of the casts, but like that's what we were doing. We were making casts, we were making copies, we were making molds
of Bigfoot prints.
He had over 110 prints in his lab, along with then all the different Homo erectus, Neanderthals, Homo sapiens, and so that's what we were doing in grad school. But then I was going into the field when a call would come in or an email would come in to the university. It would go to him. He was up in years. I was a younger guy.
He told you, go out, look. This is what you look for.
But it was like, here's the topo map, and here's the here's the the coordinates, and that was pretty much it. We didn't have GPS, and so. And
Washington State is the place. Were there a lot of? Well, I just said Pennsylvania and then Washington. I guess there's a lot, but were there a lot of calls at that time?
I don't know. I mean, I can tell you that I would talk to Dr. Krantz every day, every school day, Monday through Friday, to know what I needed to do, and then we would just talk Bigfoot.
So, so you're out there, and this is the second time you've seen. This is on a call from someone else, or you're just
So and again, there were so many calls that would come in. I don't know how many. I couldn't give you a number because most of the time we didn't investigate stuff. It was only when because he was constantly getting people trying to hoax, and get him to look foolish. And
people that need attention.
And so basically certain people that needed attention or certain people that in the past he felt didn't, come across as straight, he just simply wouldn't investigate anything of theirs. And sadly, one of those people, I believe, was Paul Freeman, who to this day many people think that's some of the best footage. But because some of his tracks had features that to Dr. Krantz were questionable, he didn't send me out to look at any of that. However, those were in the Blues Mountains, and that's where I had my second encounter. It was in the Blues Mountains.
Okay, hang on right there. We're going to be right back, folks. Hey, everybody, let me tell you about my friend Elaine Hathaway. She's not just an incredible tarot reader. I know because I had a reading. She also does curse breaking, healing and prosperity magic, and the removal of dark entities. I had a client that was constantly being bothered by a dark entity. I sent her to Elaine, and man, she cleared that situation up right away. It was so impressive. She does so many things. Please check out her website at therisingmoon.com. There you can click on her YouTube channel and take a look at her because you're going to feel like curse breaking and the removal of dark entities. This is a little old woman sitting in the corner of the room with a hood and a cape. No, she is the loveliest person. She does so many things other than tarot. Please check out her website at therisingmoon.com. You can also hear her October 23rd on this show at therisingmoon.com. All your paranormal and metaphysical needs will be met there. Okay, we're back. And by the way, you're using a lot of words that I don't know what they mean, so I'm assuming the listeners do. If not, look it up, people. Okay, so you're in the Blue Mountains. This is number 2.
Yeah, I had my my old Honda, and I was driving out. I remember this being the springtime event, sometime in May probably, and driving up. I think it was about 1995, and he'd sent me out to investigate an alleged Bigfoot had been shot and had grabbed some sapperlings, twisted them down, and there was allegedly there was hair, there was blood, and so I was heading to investigate that location. He'd already talked to the individual and interviewed him. So I'm on my way out and driving to the location. It starts snowing. Oh. and I was not expecting snow. Now, I mean, I had a kit at the time, tent, wood. I had all the things in the back of my car for, to get up and go. Renee now is probably, I know she made a comment in the last couple of weeks, well, you're packed like you're ready to go. Well, that's because, I'm getting back into it, and you've got to be ready if something's happening.
He's like the CIA. They call you and tell you you're ready, you got to grab the suitcase.
And so she's seen, like I said, I've got the car's, basically the car's ready for the outdoor stuff. I've just got some things like
that
the technology.
Actually could, if you were insecure, that would be like, are you leaving me? Why are you?
Exactly.
Is my food that bad?
You got a suitcase in your car.
You have a suitcase in your car.
Like I said, there's just weird things like that.
Commitment.
Because when you go, you don't just go for a day and turn.
Right.
It's not like a crime scene, for police. You're there to investigate, and if you're real serious, like I am, I really want to spend some time in that area and see if I have any kind of, encounter. So back then, the snow started really coming down, and I was within 3 miles of my destination on some logging road. Again, looking at this California contour map, which she knows I just bought another of those because I've now gotten lost twice in the last year.
With the GPS?
With the GPS, where it cuts out in the middle of the mountains, and then I have no idea where I'm at in the middle of the night.
Like a horror movie. And
those signs, if you don't know the roads, you're in trouble. And there's too many. Now I know about missing 411 and
I know. Did
and
I
the Cali
tell you about
cartel.
That?
I don't know.
The hunters,
yeah.
Yes, and that's a big area of missing up there. A big area, yeah.
And so knowing that, and I've got a friend who's a county sheriff up in Northern California, and he told me, you were where? That's where the Cali cartel is. And I was like, oh God.
What's the Cali cartel?
The Mexican drug gang that has the illegal drug
trade.
They're
in Northern Washington?
I'm sorry, I'm rewinding now. This is current time in Northern California. I don't know if they're looking for them, but over the years I've always wanted to just try to get an in with the illegal marijuana growing people, because they're out there growing in places where these things live.
Yeah.
And But I now know a whole lot more about that. I could tell you, but let's go back to that time. So I got stuck. I got high. I wasn't high centered, but I got the snow was getting up to where I couldn't drive through it, and I couldn't see where the road was anymore. So I pulled over and set up camp that night within a few miles of, again, the location. And during that night, I was dead asleep in the tent. It was about 3 a.m, and I woke up and sat straight up, again with that feeling that something was watching me. But I was in a tent, and it was really quiet out because it was really heavy snow, again, a spring snow. And unzipping slowly the tent and looking around, couldn't really see anything, but the snow had now basically subsided, and I set up the camp in this grove of pine, and looking out through this grove of pine, eventually I would see what looked like something swaying like a tree at first, and then I realized, no, that's a head and shoulders, and part of the middle of a body, and it just kept swaying, just kind of back and forth, in and out, and again, whatever skylight there was behind it, so I'm seeing this silhouette, and at the time I had a 30-06, and I put the scope on it, and I'm looking, not to shoot it, but I'm looking to see what is this thing. And sadly, I couldn't tell how tall it was, how big it was. I knew it was pretty far away, and I knew it was really big, whatever it was. But all I could get was this like head and shoulder outline. And, the one regret I have in life is that at that young age, and I hate to say this to your viewers, but that I didn't. At the time, Dr. Krantz and I were fully of the belief that to save them all, if they're out there,
you need to find out about one.
You need to bring one in to save the rest, and that meant to shoot one, and that was my chance, and I had it in my sights, looking right at its head, and I didn't pull the trigger because, again, growing up in Pennsylvania, Mr. Foster, may he rest in peace, was my geography teacher in 7th grade, but he's also the guy that taught me hunter safety. And you had to take a class before you could shoot a gun or fur trap, things of that nature. And you don't shoot something if you're not sure what it is. And you don't shoot something that's not like game. Now, knowing that, I also knew what we were, quote unquote, hunting for. With Dr. Krantz, he was very clear that we needed to, get a specimen. And I couldn't do it.
Now, see, that's an interesting thing, though, because when I find out how fast they are, when I add in that I think they're interdimensional, I also think they're very, very smart. Now, when it was wobbling back and forth, was it in the 3D world? It wasn't like going in and out visually, it was just wobbling.
For me, visually, what I believe that I saw was kind of a sway. It was swaying, and then it disappeared. And I couldn't find it for about 20 minutes, and that's when I realized eventually I would see movement again, and it was down at the ground doing the same thing at the base of the tree on, again, either all fours or on its belly, because I would see the head and shoulder, maybe the elbow, kind of pop up, because now it's down, and behind it there was ground clutter. But I could make out something
that was making that same movement.
Because higher up, it was open sky kind of, in terms of the background. But as it got down lower, there was more clutter, so I couldn't make out as much detail, but it had done that.
Now, were you terrified?
Oh, yeah. I stayed up.
I don't want to see that anywhere. I don't want to see that in Van Nuys.
But I didn't smell anything. So the second time there was no smell. But there was an equal amount of terror. But again, it was terror only because I didn't know what I was looking at, and I knew how big it was, and I knew that whatever it was had woken me up from a sleep, but it wasn't making any noise. So like in my mind, I'm trying to I have ADHD. And so I'm sitting there, and every thought is going through my brain by myself, like, what woke me up then? I'm not hearing anything. Did it come by? Did it tap the tent? But then the next day, there were no footprints or anything around the tent. And again, there was a recent snow, and it had snowed a little bit more. But I went out there and I measured it, and it was over 8. There was a branch where the head was popping out, and I paid attention to that tree and the branch, of course, and went out and measured that the next morning, and it was 8 foot 2 inches up. So this thing was. That's where its chin was,
wow.
And so I'm thinking that it must have been 9 foot plus, 9 foot, 9.5 feet maybe.
Now I think this is a thing. It's like every podcast, I do a lot of podcasts on fae and fairies, and everything leads back to that for me. Like whatever, that's my whatever spirit leans towards that. I don't think people have one Bigfoot encounter. I think once you're sort of chosen, you're on that vibe, so you wake up and you're like, oh, there's another one here. I'm not as scientific-y as you can tell, even if that's...
But I don't even know if there's, again, this is what we know we don't know. We know that people have that experience. I've had that experience. Like, again, I'm getting goosebumps because I know when they're around. It's like I pulled over, now this is fast-forwarding to this year, I pulled over to go to the bathroom on the side of the road in Northern California between Grants Pass and Gasky, between the border of Oregon, and I pulled over to go to the bathroom, and I started to head over towards, like, the wood line, and I got a feeling, and I turned around, went back in and held it because I was like, no, something ain't right. And it wasn't just that something's there, it didn't feel good. It felt like, I got to get moving. Now, what could that have all been in my head? Could I have been tired from driving? Maybe. But as she can tell you, Renee will tell you, I drive. I mean, I can go 1,000 miles, and that makes me happy, And last summer we did 12,000 miles together. 12,000 miles over a couple of weeks is like my norm. And I'm not a truck driver. I just get in my car and I go to visit friends, go to places. In this case, it was Bigfoot related stuff. I was moving the van back from Idaho, and continuing. I'm going to fast forward to this story if you don't mind.
Sure, and then I want to go back to California.
Well, let me finish the Washington State. So in Washington State, then the next day I got up, I found footprints, 19 and a half inch long footprints. I was able to track it a ways, almost a mile and a half through the woods. Now this is back in the time of the 110 camera. Took some pictures, but they were over whatever. It was like it looked like white, and so I gave Dr. Krantz had those. And but I was able to track it to this big thicket, literally like thorny bush, about 5.5, 6 feet tall. And as I got within 200 yards of that, a second set of tracks joined it. Oh. And as I got near where the tracks hit the thicket, I couldn't make out what I was seeing anymore. And I was in my early 20s. I could track footprints, but I don't know what I was seeing on the ground. But it looked as though they had dropped down because it was a lot of disturbance in the edge of the snow, and then it was just mud. But what was interesting is that it was almost like it was a woven tunnel into the thicket. But it was low, and for as big as this thing was, it was really weird. Because it was maybe 3 or 4 feet wide and maybe 3 or 4 feet tall in this really big thicket. Now, there are deer trails and things. As a hunter, you know to look for game trails. And game trails go in and out of these, especially deer love to go and hide in these thickets. But they're not the same. There's something really weird that, to me, looked constructed, if you will, about the way that the plants were going together. But I got down and looked in. I didn't get down on all fours. Now, I did have don't trust me, I had my rifle out. But I didn't hear anything. There was a little bit of a smell, but it wasn't anything more than just your regular kind of animal smell. And looking in there, it went back a ways, and then it curved, and I couldn't see any farther. And I didn't continue to pursue it. My fear got the best of me because I don't have a cell phone, don't have GPS. The only person who knows where I'm at is Dr. Krantz, and he only knows the place he was sending me to. And again, at that age, you do a lot of things that, looking back,
I know,
like,
I would never.
What the hell was I doing?
I remember once when I was a kid, we crawled through the water tunnels that went under the city and popped up through a manhole where we had no idea. Not on my list now. So, but I understand that fear. You would have had to have someone with you, period, even if you were going to even start that. And I wouldn't have done it that way anyway. So
the long and the short of that trip is ended up getting hair samples, ended up getting photographs of those footprints. Couldn't take any casts because it was snow, and the plaster was a thermoplaster back then. Now they've got the hydrocal, which still I don't know. I don't trust making casts of snow prints. Yeah. I like a good mud print or earth print. So we got hair, we got DNA. Back then, in the 90s, though, they didn't have the tests. So at the time while I was with Dr. Krantz, we had 3 different DNA samples that got sent out to different places, like Dr. Henner Fehrenbach in Oregon, the Primate Institute in Oregon, Berkeley, because that's where Dr. Krantz had gone to school. And all 3 came back, unknown primate, related to humans and us, but distinct from each. And, of course, then off the record, what the hell, is this? What were you guys making, your own hair up there? Because other times it'd be wig fiber. Now we know we can look at them under a microscope, and Renee's now seen me doing this, and I've shown her some of the hairs that I've collected from Northern California that don't have a medulla, and you can see that, and so then you can know, okay, if this has a follicle, this is one that we want to save, not contaminate and send in. So fast forward.
And when you say medulla, medulla is a...
the when you look at a hair, the hair has an outer part, kind of a middle part, or an interior, and then a very central core. In humans, that core is either like a solid filled with pigment, or broken up, kind of linear from root to tip. With these, they've got a central kind of shaft, but there's no pigment in it, which is very unique. It's distinct. And so when you see a hair like that, now I've now since learned that there are a few other species that could be, but I highly doubt that hair I collected in the mountains came from a seal. There's certain animals that do have that ability to have no pigment and have been found with no pigment. So then the question is, what's your other evidence? And so that second thing, we got DNA, we got the hair. There was blood even, but the blood had been too degraded, because blood you've got to really get right away, especially if it's out in the environment, because that blood had been degraded by the sunlight, ultraviolet, and the snow and the temperature.
Now, I have to ask you, has anyone successfully shot a Bigfoot? I don't think it's possible.
Unfortunately, I wish you were right. I would have been able to tell you for sure had I pulled the trigger, but I did not. But secondhand knowledge from people that I've talked to and stories I've heard, yes. I mean, they've been shot many times, and they've been hit by semis.
But they disappear, right?
Not always. Well, let me rewind. They disappear in the sense that the remains are there, and then they're gone.
So we don't know if that's them or...
We don't know. It could be people, could be them, could be some other unanswered, another thing. But there are times, though, there are other stories that I hear where when they are shot, there's a flash, and then they're gone. But the experiences that aren't that in that category of completely unexplainable, the categories of multiple eyewitnesses, semi-truck hits one, they call the police, there are people that pulled over and saw this big animal on the ground, and then the next thing you know, the freeway's shut down, the truck's been impounded while the people are in the hospital. There's no news report, or there's a report of a bear attack, or bear's been hit. For me,
so the government government doesn't want this out there either.
Well, and we use that we put it into the words the government.
Yeah.
I don't know who it is, but somebody, some intelligence organization, paramilitary, some group has, I think, been
tinkering.
Since we've known about these things. For me, if I'm going to be conspiratorial in some way, but really, it's just trying to look at the information and connect the dots. From the time of the first president that wrote about these animals, the Big Game Hunter book, was Teddy Roosevelt, and it was just after his administration that we created the national park system. Which basically, in every national park system, we know that there are Bigfoot encounters and sightings, as well as other paranormal things.
411s.
And you get your missing 411s. So I feel like I don't know. I don't understand. Like, I'm still trying to ask my audience on my, when I do surveys, what do you think? Why do you think, if there's a government cover-up, why? What is it that they're afraid of? Like with UFOs, and again, I don't want to digress too much, but, we always hear, the public would panic. But they announced the UFOs existed last October, a year ago now. And then they doubled down on that with the Pentagon saying, "Yep, UFOs are real. We don't know what they are." And I feel like there's some kind of disclosure that's slowly happening. But how Bigfoot ties into that, and why the cover up with Bigfoot, the only thing I can imagine is that the lawsuits. I mean, I know some people believe it's the timber industry, or it's the spotted owl effect, but I think that I really believe that it's not that. I believe that there's the number of lawsuits that would happen for the government not telling its public about something that it knows about that takes people whether that's taking them to eat them. I don't know.
Oh,
Again,
we're going to go right there before we even get to California, because I feel like this was my theory, but I didn't know that Bigfoot was taking people, or maybe is, and that goes back to missing 411. I feel like the bigger sense. I always say religion and the control of human beings' sexuality. You control the sexuality, you control the person. So there's all these rules. You get married, you have kids, you don't break that, Once you bring in, there's other beings, there's other dimensions, the whole house of cards starts to crumble. Well, wait a minute, you just told us there was God and Jesus. And it all starts to unfold. So I think there is something like that. And also, if somebody could catch a Bigfoot, or a bunch of them, and have a military, they're gonna, you know what I mean? That's a very powerful, keep everyone, that's my theory of the Matrix, keep everyone down, just stay in your lane, don't look up. Have there been, or let's do this, tell me about California, and then in the third, we're gonna talk about them, are they taking people or whatever, or what's going on.
I'll just put a pin in that and say, look, I only bring that up because I'm trying to understand what's the basis of a cover-up. Why would they cover this up if it's just an animal, unless it really would mess with our social, religious, those deep institutions that control us and control what we do. Yeah. Now, again, I hear it in my own words, the conspiracy that it sounds like, but logic in me says, what is the logic of not just disclosing the fact that, these things have been hit, that you've shot them, that the military comes in missing 411 cases, cordons off areas where even the search and rescue people can't come to? Why are the FBI involved in cases that they're not supposed to be involved in, flying around with helicopters and helping, quote unquote, in these missing persons cases? So again,
I had an interesting talk with my friend up in Washington who does this, and he says the military knows how to put a shield, or like where, like, I'm looking at you, the military could come in, cloak that, I'm still in my apartment, I don't see you, which I don't know if they can, but that would be an interesting, like, did we cloak this guy, do we let him back out, or do we take him? But I have such distrust for everything. Interesting though that I remember even the beginning they're saying Trump is gonna not fund the national parks, or he's gonna sell off that land, and that didn't happen. I think the national parks, that's interesting, that is not just for us, that's for them.
Yeah, and so that's, again, one of the hypothesis, because there's so many ideas of why that's the one. I'm leaning towards that only because of the evidence that I've gotten, not firsthand, and this is why I want to really be clear to the audience that, I'm an anthropologist, I am a scientist, I'm only putting this out here for discussion, because you got to start somewhere, and I don't know, it's not adding up for me as a logical, reasonable person what's going on out there. Now, again, I'm not going to either, and I'm also not going to say that Bigfoot is to blame for missing 411. Again, we don't know about these gateways and portals, and maybe they're opening up. Maybe there's some kind of a thinning of the veil, or I've heard all kinds of things now.
Joshua Cushion has a great theory that it's fairies.
And we'll come, and I'll be happy to do a whole other discussion with you sometime on fairies. I'm reading a really great book right now about folklore and the idea of little green men. Leprechauns, little green men, or little men in green. Just different cultures, again, anthropologically, having different names for the same thing.
Oh, that's so true.
And so Bigfoot are the big people other than us, and little people could be fairies, could be gnomes, could be whatever. It's all whatever, and they're all the same, really. It's just maybe they're different. Like us, we all look a little different, but we're all still human.
Right.
And so, nonetheless, I'll digress.
I'm going to stop. Yeah, that's the next one. We'll do this again. Let's take a break, and we'll be right back with the California story. Psychic medium and buddy of mine, Terry Huberman, is with me today. Terry, you've given me so many great readings and healings, and now you've got everything together in one package. Tell me about that.
I sure do. So this package has energy healings, readings, and coaching.
Coaching, that's the best. And people, they buy the package. You give them coaching once a week?
Yeah, so we meet online once a week, and in between, there's support as well.
And who would this be for?
This is really for folks who are in indecision, needing to get into their intuition because they're blocked or stuck. They need to move forward. And so we explore what the root causes of the problems are.
And helps them get out of their own way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Terrific. And what can they expect from this?
Sure. So moving from anxiousness to confidence, accessing their freedom, joy, and security, and really being in alignment with themselves so they have that clear direction, so they know, aha, this is what I need to do next to reach my goals.
So now there's something that's free so people can talk to you and see if this is for them.
Yeah, absolutely. On my website, terryhuberman.com, there is a page where you can click, and it's the intuitive coaching package. And there is a button there that says schedule a free call. So you go ahead, schedule it. We'll get on a call and you can learn more about this program, and we'll see if this is a good fit for you or not.
See if there's chemistry.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's an odd date.
terryhuberman.com, TerrieHuberman. I highly recommend it, folks. All right, we're back. Okay, so then you were in Northern California, which, by the way, is this the Trees of Mystery? I used to drive through this, and it's those big redwoods, and it is lovely, terrifying. It's the thing I love driving. It's like the 5, isn't it? Straight up?
Yeah, so to get to Northern California would take me to my third encounter, which was years later. Life went on, became a teacher and lived in Texas, lived in different places. People were still sending me Bigfoot stuff because they knew that was my thing. But I really wasn't, investigating anything. Well, then Renee and I are on a road trip last summer, and we're stopping at Native American museums and, learning as much as we can about different cultures. And I remember we stopped at one in northern Michigan. We stopped at the Iroquois Nation and the Mohawks in New York, and they told us about a place. And I'm really fast forwarding now. So we ended up driving, because it was on the way back to my hometown in Pennsylvania. We ended up driving from the Finger Lakes area down, visited my nephew in Fort Drum, and then we ended up down in near Salamanca Casino, which is odd, because it was really, the third encounter we had was less than a few miles from the casino. And we drive into Allegheny National Forest. And we're driving south and west through there, and I see some weird trees, and she was like pretty much over it with me, and like is everything a Bigfoot tree thing? I'm sorry, I don't mean to give her that voice.
2-hour detour.
Well, that's a great impression of her you just did.
So she hates it when I do that. But anyways, I pulled over and was taking some pictures of these two weird, they were young, small trees. Anything could have put them over, but it was weird because the rest of them were fine. And I'm always thinking, as soon as I see something like that, could weather have done this? Could this have been snowpack? Could this have been wind? Could this have been a person? Because this wasn't far, especially when it's not far from the road, could have been a snowplow. But this was weird. They were, and so I pulled over to take some pictures, and that's when the third encounter happened. I started hearing the samurai chatter. Now she's in the passenger seat and hears nothing. I'm out of the car. I'm excited. I'm trying to switch my iPhone over from photo to video, and this thing is going off. Now, we're on a 2-lane road that's 55 mile an hour, and it had just rained a little bit. So it's get all this background noise, and the iPhone is not great for audio. But I start filming, and as soon as I start filming, the one that I could hear way up on top of this mountain that the Native Americans had told me about, Gahai, the Witchlight Mountain, behind me across the road and between us and the Allegheny River, which was only maybe 30 or 40 yards. It was just a little, but it was all woods. I get whoop, 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 loud, and it made me jump. And now again, she's still in the vehicle, windows up, and vehicle sounds. So she's not hearing any of this. And I'm filming, and then as soon as I turn to film that direction, then behind me it sounds like something's coming down the hill and breaking branches. Now, it wasn't quite like a bluff charge, but it was definitely check me out, here I come. And I turned back, still not seeing anything, because again, it's July, 3rd of July, last summer, and
covered.
It's green, everything's green. Now, it's about 6:30 at night, but it's summer, so it's still light out, and I'm not getting anything. And I'm still hearing the one faintly at the top of the hill doing some kind of, they call it the samurai chatter, but it's some kind of gibberish that I don't quite understand, but it sounds like words.
Yeah.
This thing is breaking branches and, making footfalls, whether it's, actually moving or not, or things, because again, I can't tell. It sounded like one was breaking branches, but it also sounded like one was on the move. So there could have been 4 or more, as far as I know. Wow. I go on record as saying 3 because I ended up with that photo I took capturing one, looking at her, in the vehicle when I was out of the vehicle, looking down. At least it looked like it was looking towards her based on the angle of where it was looking and where it was in the photo. And this one behind then slowly starts to change its whooping into woofing. And by the end, it was trying to sound like a dog. And so by then, I come around the car to her, and I'm like, Renee, I know you heard that. I know you. And this video, this whole video I'm talking about, I posted on YouTube. And I'm like, I know you heard. I know. She's like, what? What did you hear? I'm like, well, what did it sound like to you? And she says very distinctly. Now she's from Northern California. She's from Crescent City, the coast, the big trees. Her whole life never seen, or she didn't even know about Bigfoot until we met, which is crazy to me. Like, how can you live in Bigfoot country and not? But who knows?
Pennsylvania, yeah.
But Pennsylvania. I mean, nobody at that time thought Bigfoot was in Pennsylvania, except for the people that were seeing them. But they were probably doing the same thing I was doing. All this thing. Once I knew what it was, this is not. I must have seen a bear or a big person.
And everyone, if you're hearing an alarm, it's my watch. Don't worry about it.
And so she says it sounded like a barking seal, but again, not a dog. And so then we investigate for the next 15, 20 minutes to try to find a place where there could be a dog, because I was yelling and calling, and this thing, and I was making the sounds that it was making it. But so we thought maybe it's on a leash, maybe there's a house down there, maybe there's a path. We couldn't. It was just woods to the creek,
wow.
And this animal never showed itself. But again, I listened to the transformation of whoops to more of a mimicking of a dog, and then the noise on the hillside stopped, the jibber jabber stopped, and but later I would go back and look at my pictures in the film and see that there was at least one that you can see between the branches with the brow ridge. It had a conical head,
up,
very
up or
patty,
down? Up?
Very patty-like. It was on the hill looking down at the car. But I would then a couple nights later with my brother-in-law and my cousin and my nephew and a friend of ours drive back up there, because this is about 2.5 hours from my hometown.
So Renee, your brother's ready to get in on this?
Oh no, not hers.
Oh, not brother-in-law.
But
Okay.
it was my brother-in-law.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law, and we went back out there. And here's the crazy thing. The first encounter up there, all this noise. And I retook the picture because, again, I wanted to compare. Could it have been a stump? Could I have seen something? Was I imagining what was there? Nothing was there. So there was something there in that first picture. We went up into the hill. Now, this time we went later, so now it's dark. But the four of us hike up into this hill that we weren't supposed to be on because they said it's reservation lands. I don't know. It was along the roadside. But dead silence. Summer night. No crickets, no
squirrels.
There's bugs flying all around us, like mosquitoes and things. Unless it was right in your ear, it was like there was no sound. Again, it was that weird feeling like I had in my first encounter, like I'm in a dome of silence.
Quiet. Yep.
Like the air isn't moving, and it was weird, but there were no sounds. It was the exact opposite of what I prepared them for. No, we at one point I thought I heard a low growl, but it wasn't discernible to know for sure. My brother-in-law at one point saw what he thought was an amber eye shine. We all had our iPhones and lights on. We were trying to film. So again, technology-wise,
what's an amber eye shine? Where it
amber,
reflects?
like if you hit somebody's eyes at night with your headlights, like a deer, there's different colors,
yeah.
And so like an amber colored eye shine versus a green or any other. He thought he saw one at one point, and it came from the area where I thought I heard a growl, but we didn't see or anything. But where this thing had been, there was a game trail from the previous, where I saw and got a picture of the thing looking at her. There was a game trail. Something had broken a tree over there, laid it down across the game trail. And I think that I had interrupted maybe a hunt. Maybe they were driving things, because that one I think was in the ambush position. The one at the top of the hill was driving.
Like, hey, somebody's coming.
I think the one below me might have been also driving. Again, it was close to dusk.
Now, when you say ambush position, this is very interesting because when this is going on around the car, it's like they're surrounding you.
Well, I feel like I drove into something that I don't think that they had set that up for me, because it was happening when we got there.
But do you think it was like that was the noises were like, hey, somebody's come in, let's scare them a little bit?
It's possible, but my thought at the time wasn't thinking about any of that. But then looking back at the situation, I felt like they were hunting, like deer or whatever, and we ended up in the middle of their spot. I only feel that way now because of so many other people having been in that similar thing, not understanding what was going on, why me, luckily for me, I never. She'll tell you, I was excited more than I was afraid. Like nothing was being thrown at me. I didn't see one. One other than the one kind of coming down the hill and making noise. It wasn't like trees. It wasn't really. It didn't sound aggressive. It just sounded like something was on the move. But it was funny because I found where the thing had been breaking branches. Whatever it was, I found the broken spots on the tree, but it had taken all the broken branches with it somewhere. They weren't there. So I was looking for evidence of the snaps that I was hearing, because the snaps just kept coming from the same spot. Like something was sitting there, snap, snap, snap.
You think that's clearing the way because they're so big?
It could be, but again, this was in one, like right in that ambush spot. This one wasn't moving. It was just breaking the branches. This was after I had gotten there, and my presence was known. I'd stopped the car. I'm out filming, and very excited.
Tell me
obviously,
why they break branches.
I think it was to get my attention, and that's the weird thing. Like, and so my second thought is, if they weren't like hunting, that perhaps I caught them foraging and got between or too close to a male or a female and some young ones, perhaps. That's my only other anthropologically thinking. They were trying to distract me so that they could move on, like across the road or move farther down through the woods. And whatever it was successful, because again, I have no idea what was going on other than what I've just described. The three different sound sources, maybe four. Again, if those footsteps weren't the one that was then snapping, if that one was one that was on the move, I'm not sure, because there are some other things in the images that could be others, but I've never photographed or videotaped one that has been not in this three-dimensional space. I'll just say that, as far as I know.
Now, do you think you obviously must have heard from people who've been attacked or chased, or is it not really in there? The story that got me, that the guy told on the last podcast, was about someone very long ago whose car got stuck. This was maybe in the 60s. It's 2 a.m. He realizes no one's coming, gets out of the car, starts to run, going to turn around and run, and runs into a Bigfoot. And it just pummels him. Just until it was like a PTSD where he wouldn't talk to the guy that wrote the book. And folks, if you want to look back at that one, that's, I think, in the first season about Bigfoot. And I was like, did he stun that one? Or was that just like, bam? Like, that's an odd story.
Well, I have a friend, so this is not firsthand, but within 1 degree of separation from me, who was crawling out of his tent and thought he put his hand on a mountain beaver. To this day, I think that's, well, I know that there was a period of time where he thought what was probably the reality, but he's now since reconvinced himself for sure that it was a mountain beaver that he put his hand on.
A lot of times that happens when we get that scared. And I've seen people do it in paranormal experiences too. No, I don't think that was what it was.
But, and I'm not plugging here, but a guy who I've not met, but whose documentary I really enjoyed up in Wisconsin, Jay Buchanan, Finding Jay is the name of his documentary. And in that documentary, he gets blasted with a rock. I mean, they throw rocks towards and around people all the time. And again, I know people, and it's happened to me, in the Northern California, they throw stuff near you. I don't know if they're just like, playing, if they're trying, if it's a nice way of saying get out of here. When they're smaller things, when they're bigger things, I think they're trying to say, get out. Like, again, I don't want to tell another person's story, but I have a family member who was out fishing late at night and with a friend during the epidemic. So nobody was out. This is early, like March this year. And this is in western Pennsylvania, the border of Pennsylvania and Ohio. And they had hiked out to an island to fish, and something threw a very large rock into the water. And when I say very large, a boulder, because both of them were like, no idea. Like, what was that? How did that happen? There was nothing else that came along with it, but there's so many stories about people getting things thrown at them. So when it comes to actual people, hurt by them, there have been people that have been hurt by them. There's lots of stories that I've heard, at least on podcasts for sure. One of my favorites is the British woman who was by the ocean, and she was photographing, and she'd hiked from her vehicle, a couple miles in to get to the beach to film, and there were, I think it was 4 of these creatures in the ocean, and when they noticed her, they came over, and when she came to, she was back by her car, and she was badly bruised. Now, she wasn't dead. There's a story from Florida of the two fishermen that something threw rocks at them. They thought it was an African-American person. They started throwing expletives and pulled their boat up to the shore and got out and started throwing rocks back at it. It then did the swaying thing, and it was no person. Came out through a branch, hit the guy, busted his teeth, his ribs, knocked him back into the ocean. I'm assuming down there in the swamps or something, and maybe it wasn't the ocean, but like the swampy area down there. And then again, once they went to the hospital and everything else, they were forced to say that it was a bear. That the news report said bear. They had to write down and sign something that said that it was a bear. And because one of the gentlemen worked for, I don't remember, I think it was the police, department, and claimed that there was a book that these things went into a file, and that was it, and you didn't talk about it anymore. So again, what the cover-up is and to what extent, who knows, but that's weird to me. Like, it's weird that...
It's not a sensible
especially
one.
If you can go to that guy and see that there's a medical record. I mean, did his friend hit him with a branch and bust his ribs and, and teeth and arm? I don't know.
That I've also heard stories about how people will be camping in a camper and something will shake it, and it's like a guy can't come up and shake a camper like that. Like they're going to knock it over.
Yeah, or slap it. They do a lot of slapping the sides of houses, trailers, especially people. It seems like it happens a lot when people move into a place that's been abandoned, like that nobody's lived in for a while. They like property that's been sitting there, or if they go and then they start to clear land. And take trees and things down, whether it's for farming or just have a bigger yard or a view of something. Those situations tend to end up with, or, of course, if you go and clear something and build new and move in, then those places tend to have a lot of the slapping, which is funny, again, going back to the paranormal and the haunting. There's a lot of things that I think have been classified as hauntings that are actually just Bigfoot.
Could be,
and maybe vice versa. I'm getting into the amount of information that's coming in is making me start to have to be more open-minded than I once was. I mean, originally, back in the days of Dr. Krantz, this has to be an ape, it has to be an anthropoid, something like us.
We just haven't got it yet.
Now, because of my own experiences and because of the facts that are there, I mean, for anybody who wants to go and look at the facts, they're out there. I don't know what this might not be just another animal the way that we know animals. I don't know because there's not just this. Now I've only seen, and as far as I know, this creature. I mean, there's people that see, half goat people, half. There was a woman that we met up by Eureka, who used to work for the Park Service, who is now managing the motel up there, who said that she saw, was it a badger person. Like she said, it had the head of a badger, and of course, then that gets me reading more. I was raised religiously, raised Christian, and I read the Bible more. And I'm like, well, what about these Nephilim that like supposedly had sex with all these different animals on our planet, and that's why, they were cast down, or Cain, and there's just so many different weird aspects now. I haven't seen these things, but because I've seen things that other people haven't seen, I can't say, hey, you're not telling truth. I'm not the authority.
That's the weird
I'm one
thing.
person of many who has seen or experienced things that aren't supposed to be there.
That's the weird thing when people get touchy about other people's paranormal experiences. I mean, you can tell right away when someone's lying, but it's none of you don't know what they saw. You don't know what they experienced. I just did a podcast with Jeff Thill about the Anunnaki, who were supposed to, be the great DNA slicers and made these things. It's amazing. I wonder if, because I do feel like we're on the cusp of everything changing. The veil is so thin right now. Things have been bleeding over, and even like I don't think we're going to get to it because we only got a couple minutes. But we were talking earlier, UFOs and Bigfoot. This is now, Mothman was that big everything at once. We got UFOs, which makes it even sound more crazy.
Exactly. It's especially if you are one of the people who have never seen any of these things, don't know anybody personally who's seen these things that you trust in some way. Like, again, my friends, my close friends, they know who I am. They know what I'm about. Mm-hmm. They know that I'm not making this up. But people that don't know me from Adam, that see a story or hear what I have to say, they're going to have their own opinions on it. And I understand it. Again, because one of the things I studied was psychology. I understand how the brain works and how we think and feel about things. But to quickly wrap up the Bigfoot piece, because we should talk again about the fairies and the UFOs and the veil, and because I'm learning more and more about all that because of the crazy experiences I've had just this year. So now 2020 comes, after we had that experience last year, I start this website in the past year. I really amp everything up, and I take a sabbatical because I'm really focusing now full time on looking into these things, investigating, and trying to learn as much as I can. We go to Northern California, and she's from the Redwoods area. Through one of her friends, I meet now a good friend and good contact up there who's lived for 17 years on this property on 2 mountaintops in Del Norte County. And he's had 17 years of encounters. He's in David Polidi's book, Tribal Bigfoot. There's a chapter dedicated to him. And I get to meet him firsthand. We're actually good friends now. And I interviewed him, and he took me out on his property. And while we were out on the property, I see where something has put a tree in our path. I see where they've broken trees down where there aren't people. Nobody goes back there but him and bear and cougar, and mountain lion. And we go back into this area, and yes, this is definitely a Bigfoot. Like, I don't know if it's a highway. I don't know if it's he and I think that they might have a trap line that they run and walk, when they want to go out and forage or hunt. But it's really weird. And so then I start getting game cams, setting them up. In the time this year alone, I've been out with I've now reconnected to the Bigfoot kind of world because I'd been a teacher and been away from it. And in reconnecting, I've reconnected with some members of the Bigfoot Research Organization, the BFRO, in Oregon and Washington State, and hoping to connect with some in Northern California. And those individuals, Cliff Barrickman from Finding Bigfoot, he's up in Boring, Oregon now with his museum. And I've been able to connect with them and find places to go. And they've actually taken me out. One of the BFRO guys, Kevin Merriman, has taken me to one of his spots. We went out and sat by Mount St. Helens one night and heard some very large owls. I'll say that. I know that he absolutely believes they were owls. I'm not fully convinced. Didn't have any other encounters. I went out with Jason Wells of the Oregon Bigfoot Research Organization from Bend, Oregon, and he and some of his friends, Jeff and others, took me to one of their habituation places.
So it's full time now.
Well, it's when she'll allow me to, because I am in a relationship, but she's not a Bigfooter, and so it's trying to find the balance between this passion of mine and these things that are happening, and so for instance, again with these guys, we went out and we sat in the over 3,000 feet up, freezing cold snow, and there were 3 of us, and within 5 minutes we get 3 wood knocks, very loud and distinct wood knocks.
Wow.
No other experience that night, but in this time then on that property, my friend Kurt has found a 22.5-inch trackway going up a river that I can't, and I'm a swimmer, swimming and diving. I couldn't swim across that river. This thing walked up this river, and he was able to photograph his boot next to one of the prints of this thing. I've gone back up there. We moved a Sportmobile from Idaho back there in the story I was telling you about pulling over and needing to go to the bathroom. And when we got there, no sooner than I get there, I was parking the van. I had an assistant friend with me, May Lou. She was going to sleep in the Sportmobile, so I was setting game cams up because I know that they don't like. I've come to understand that they don't like their picture being taken and that they can see the infrared. So I was setting on the 4 corners of the Sportmobile these cameras up, and no sooner did I was setting the first one up, than I see these 2 white glowing eyes, big, round. And I'm thinking, okay, it's about 4:20 in the morning. I've been driving 500 miles since Idaho. I must be tired. But this is now 20 minutes after getting that weird feeling when I wanted to go to the bathroom. But I'm looking at this thing at the back of his driveway, which ends up being about 60 yards away, high up, 2 eyes. I'm thinking, oh, those are white reflectors. He must have 2 of those round white reflectors there. Because I had my iPhone camera, because I was using that to make light to see how to hook the game cam up to the back of my Sportmobile, either to the trailer hitch or to the tire. Because I've never done it before, so I'm trying to figure out how do I want to do this. But meanwhile, then I'm hearing it's windy and there's cans rolling. I'm like, what? And I'm really jumpy, but I feel on edge, like there's something watching me. And I look back and there's these 2 big eyes. And I mean big, round and farther, not like way far apart than ours, not real way bigger than ours, but like the size of reflectors or slightly bigger. and slightly farther apart than ours. And I'm looking at that, and in my mind's like, is that an owl? You know, what is that? Or maybe it's got to be reflectors. And I go back and I finish hooking this camera up. I turn the light back, and they're gone. And that, 5 minutes later, whoop, right next to the thing while I'm still hooking up the other cameras, we get a super loud whoop, and then about a mile away up the mountain, like a whistle, two-tonal whistle, really loud, coming back. And again, I can't do it justice. And then a weird, either grumble, growl, again, far distant. And then between these things communicating, then his roosters start going off. Fast forward, again, I know we're out of time, but I'll just say this. I want to share with you some of the photos that game camera caught, because I ended up angling it up, not straight back the driveway, but up, so that it caught kind of the tops of the trees, because I figured if something comes up the driveway, I want to get it when it's closer and kind of an upward shot at it. It took over 4,000 photos that morning.
Wow.
Because the wind was blowing, and so every time the trees would move just even a little bit, it would take it. And I got stuff on there that I've never seen, and I didn't see it until I was looking at it with Renee, and we put it on our Sony big screen. I put the card in the side, and I just was watching them with her. I was like, what in the is that? She's like, I don't know. I mean, we're looking at stuff that I don't know, and in my mind I'm thinking, okay, maybe that was an insect, but you
can tell.
And then as the daylight breaks, there's a series of, I don't know, maybe 100 plus just pink pictures of the sky, and then boom, a rectangular aircraft. For one frame. These things were taking pictures like you wouldn't believe. For one frame, there's something there, and then it's gone. And in the same neighborhood, they've gotten weird pictures of these like space Snoopies flying. His neighbors have shown him. And he's had all kinds of he just had it again last week. He messaged me that the field lit up, and his greenhouse was glowing. He went outside, and all the light was gone. Middle of the night.
You know, that's the, I cannot find, and it's is it Ghost Stop? My friend that has the store, Ghost Stop or Ghost Hunter Shop, and it's in Orlando. And I cannot I like still night vision cameras, and they don't make them anymore. Everything's in digital. But that is exactly what it is. It's catching that one frame only, and it's luck. All right, it's luck.
It was blind luck.
That's how fast, even a ghost photo, I think it's the one frame. You have to be able to click, and just get it. If anybody out there that knows of that Sony camera, or I had one, an old one that used to do it, and it was very slow, though.
And if anybody can recommend a good, I know there used to be something called all sky or something, dome camera that I could put on top of my car to only photograph deep, high atmosphere and beyond photos, so that I know that I'm not catching insects. Because the only thing I could put through my mind to rationalize what we were seeing was maybe it was like the IR light was staying on long enough, and the aperture was staying open long enough to catch these things making weird moves. But some of them look like hair. Some of them look like lightning strikes or squiggly. You know, I've since looked them up, and they're called air worms or space.
Oh, I know what those are. Yeah,
squiggles. I don't know. They got different rods.
Rods.
And there's one that looks like a lightsaber. In this, like a frame before nothing, the frame after nothing, boom, lightsaber. It's so that was
so fast.
It was, and I was looking, and we were at the same time while these pictures are being taken. There's Bigfoot stuff going on. The whooping that I heard with my own ears. 2 nights later, I camp out, and I set my iPhone audio recorder. All I can catch on that, I hear them again, and this time, before the rooster started crowing, it was quiet, it was asleep, and I heard from about 1.5 miles away, a loud screech, and then another one again returned, a whistle from the other direction. And then the rooster started going, and this guy's dogs way off in the distance started going, and so then it's like almost like they do it to get things started.
Right.
But then throughout that night, things were being thrown at me while I was asleep. You could hear like rocks or something, small objects landing around my tent, maybe even hitting the tent, other than me moving. The problem with the audio on an iPhone, and that's why really again I'm looking to try to get a better field recorder. because, man, there's some weird stuff. And I didn't even tell you about getting the tree thrown at me in Texas. There's so many things that happened this year.
All right, we're going to have you back, Carlos. Tell everyone, and this is the most important thing right now, everybody can see those pictures on your website?
I'm working on getting them up, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm putting them up as fast as I can, but the way I'm currently doing my photos, I've got to change it. But yes, my goal is to get I was actually, before I came over here today, I was trying to put together a folder for you, just in case, like, you might want to share it, and that way.
I don't have a place to share photos. But,
that's okay. Well, I'll have it up because I'm going to change the way I'm doing the photos on there and make it more.
And you got to get Instagram. You got to have Instagram right away.
Oh, I do.
Okay.
But I haven't been putting stuff up quickly enough on Instagram because I want to make sure I have watermarked it because I want people to know that it's kind of like this is something that I've captured, so that I take credit and or I get the criticism for them.
All right, and you'll let me know if there's any running through our courtyard. If there's any Bigfoot? No.
Yes, and again, this is probably where I might depart from you a little bit because if they're interdimensional and there's gateways,
they're not coming here.
Then why aren't they popping up everywhere? Why are they only in the woods and in remote areas? Why aren't they like in LA? Why aren't people seeing them on an elevator? I mean, if they can just come in and come out.
So many people hate LA.
But
Chronicles of Carlos, exactly how it sounds. You can go there. You can check out his YouTube channel, Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter. Carlos, thank you so much. We'll be doing this again very, very soon.
Thank you.
Hopefully we won't have the air conditioner humming. Fantastic. All right, everybody. If you can leave me a review or 5 stars wherever you listen, thanks to Mike at Uno Rising Media. And everybody, we'll see you next week.